Chapter 663, False Alarm. After hearing Anderson's question, Klein was momentarily at a loss for an answer. He couldn't just tell him that he had fallen out of a dream suspected to belong to Queen Mystic. He coldly looked at the unlucky strongest hunter, raised his right hand, and pointed upwards. "Is that so?" Anderson Hood nodded in enlightenment. "What did you figure out? I don't even know what I'm expressing myself." Klein discreetly twitched the corner of his lips and changed the topic. He said in recollection, "I met someone just now. Not someone we know, not a member of the future, the person who came out of the door from deep inside the hall." Anderson suddenly became excited. "This fellow doesn't put on airs of being the strongest hunter. He's like a breaking news reporter." Klein lampooned without answering him. He directly said, "She got me to pass on a prophecy to you." "She? What prophecy?" Anderson was somewhat puzzled. "If I were using my identity as Klein Moretti, I would have answered, 'Sorry, I've forgotten.' She only said it once." As Klein imagined the prank that wouldn't have happened, he said with a deep voice, "The most lethal danger often lies in day-to-day life." Anderson listened carefully as he drew a gasp. "That's just too accurate. I was drinking beer and nearly made myself a retard. Who would imagine that most of the alcohol on the future is problematic?" He ruminated for a few seconds and asked, somewhat worried, "That's it. Did you forget any details or keywords? I can tell that you're being provocative." Klein ignored Anderson Hood and walked to the entrance of the Hall of Murals, where he looked at Frank and Nina outside. Back in the library, he had been suddenly accused of being Hero Bandit Black Emperor by Queen Mystic. This inevitably caused him to be placed in a passive state. Afterwards, he attempted to throw her off and not be led by the nose. Therefore, he remained extremely nervous. His thoughts were completely focused on what he should say in response, without the time to consider the entire process and figure out the details. Now, he finally had the time. First, what's most important is to understand a question. To what level of comprehension does Queen Mystic have towards my identity and Roselle's diary? Yes, she believed that I grasped the means to interpret the language created by Emperor Roselle, and not the language itself. Although the difference in meaning isn't great, it's enough to prove that our identity as transmigrators isn't something she has figured out or have any clues that point towards that conclusion. Miss Sharon isn't a rookie who just joined the mysticism circles or got herself involved in complicated matters. While getting someone to fake an identity for me, it's impossible for her to divulge who she's doing it for. Besides, the picture I provided was already Jayaman Sparrow's image. That means that Queen Mystic hasn't equated Sherlock Moriarty to Jayaman Sparrow. Yes, if she had already known about this, as I had previously imagined, a better form of address would be Mr. Black Emperor Sherlock Moriarty. This would have dealt my mental defenses a blow that was several times stronger than directly addressing me as Hero Bandit Black Emperor. From her standpoint, how did she gather useful information from scattered clues? She knows that the bookmark is the Black Emperor card. Hence, the specter-like Hero Bandit Black Emperor and the strange spirit body who stole the card of blasphemy from the Royal Museum were connected together. Later, King of the Five Seas, Nast, suddenly appeared in the Rorstad archipelago. According to the law of beyonder characteristics convergence, she guessed that Hero Bandit Black Emperor might have appeared in Bayam and the archipelago. After her investigations, she discovered the familiar identity known as Jayaman Sparrow. Then, from his identical trajectory with Hero Bandit Black Emperor's actions, she made a prediction and engaged in pursuit. She infiltrated the future and observed me up close. This is logical, but there's a certain level of coincidences in all of this. King of the Five Seas Nast appears anywhere he likes. Perhaps he might be missing a particular lady from the Red Theater and got his ship to cross the spirit world to enter the waters around the Rorstad archipelago, or perhaps Bayam happens to have the high-sequence beyonder ingredients of the Black Emperor pathway that attracted him. There's no way to directly link it to Hero Bandit Black Emperor. Of course, it's not incomprehensible for Queen Mystic to make such a connection. Perhaps she abides by the principle of being wrong rather than feel sorry in regards to important clues. Heh, that's a good habit, but it's just tiring. There's also a high chance that she didn't lock onto Jayaman Sparrow immediately. However, with the reputation of the crazy adventurer Jayaman Sparrow becoming more prominent in the Rørsted archipelago waters and the city of Generosity Bayam, she matched the timing after hearing the name, and then she came to a preliminary conclusion. Sai, it's still better to keep a low profile in life. Thankfully, my acting has finally come to an end. Subsequently, I can make the identity of Jayaman Sparrow vanish. Klein ran through everything and felt that he had mostly understood the problem at its root. However, he had another thought and guess. It was the way Admiral of Stars Katlia had received Jayaman Sparrow on her ship. She had done it in an ostentatious manner, as though she was afraid that it wasn't known to the world that the crazy adventurer was cooperating with her. Perhaps she was providing a certain level of clues. Later, Queen Mystic came and learned that it was Jayaman Sparrow. After figuring out the trajectory of my activity at sea, she had a certain speculation. Instead of trying to pull a bluff, she was actually rather certain. Klein held one hand in his pocket as he walked out of the Hall of Murals. He then headed straight for Katlia, who was outside the Black Cloister. He planned on using her turbid state to question her. At this point, he had actually relaxed significantly. This was because Queen Mystic clearly only knew that Jayaman Sparrow was equivalent to Hero Bandit Black Emperor, and he was a beyonder who worked for some important figure. It didn't involve even more secrets. Even if she had connected the loss of the Black Emperor card that night to Detective Sherlock Moriarty, who was nearby, that wouldn't be a huge problem. From a very long time ago, I had already equated Sherlock Moriarty to the world, and I also equated that to the Blessed of the Fool. Jayaman Sparrow is only an extension of that identity. Heh, this is my preparation for such matters. I always believed that I shouldn't treat others as retards. As long as someone is active, any clues on their trajectory and social connections would lead to exposure. Therefore, I prepared this identity ahead of time for these smart people. I also strictly abided to these settings, even in my everyday life. And for the blessed of an important figure to have a basic understanding of Roselle's dairy is completely understandable and acceptable. It's within the realms of an ordinary bestowment from a special existence. You probably never expected that there's a mask under the mask. Amidst his thoughts, Klein also felt that the help from the gray fog and his caution had played a significant role. If he hadn't noticed that he had been observed by someone ahead of time while instinctively abiding by his will, he might have summoned the messenger under Queen Mystic's surveillance. The messenger alone might not expose anything, but it's worrisome that Queen Mystic might have a way of tracking it and finding Mr. Azek. From his recent sightings, it's possible for her to dig out my identity as Klein Moretti. Klein tore through a square filled with numerous giant arrows, walked out the Black Cloister, and saw Katlia sitting there as she hugged her knees just like before. She was staring at the beautiful sunset. Klein leaped onto the boulder and came to the side of the withered trees. He looked at the magnificent buildings on the opposite mountain and said in a seemingly normal manner, "At Nuz, you showcased the Star Bridge to connect the dock to the ship. Were there any hidden motives behind that?" Katlia's head leaned to the side a little as she said, "I'm not telling you." Klein was momentarily left at a loss. He originally imagined that Admiral of Stars would be very honest in the dream world. He had never expected such a situation. Of course, this was also a form of honesty, but it was an honest personality. After 2 seconds of silence, Klein decided to pull a bluff. "You wish to use this method to inform someone that I'm worthy of attention." Katlia exhaled and remained sitting there, hugging her knees. "Pretty much. It was mainly to tell others that if something serious happens, or if I show obvious abnormalities, you will be the first clue." As expected, Klein sighed inwardly. He knew that Admiral of Stars had done such a cheap trick to protect herself, but as the fool, he needed to punish her for such actions. However, I can't use this matter to act up. It will appear as though the fool protects his bless too much. That will be quite lacking in standing. Yes, Admiral of Stars must have done more than this. I can tabulate these series of actions as one and punish her for them. Klein quickly made up his mind. He wasn't as flustered towards what he encountered in this dream world again. As for Queen Mystic's suggestion, he didn't even consider it. Emperor Rosel's diary contained matters of his transmigration and Earth. If he taught Queen Mystic how to read Chinese, she would discover this point and make even more critical guesses. She must have her qualms about the important figure who can randomly lend out the Sea God scepter, so she wouldn't take any forceful actions. If there really are any matters that need her help, or if she has some dirt on me, I can agree to help her translate a few important pages of the diary she wishes to know about. But I'll definitely not teach her Chinese. Yes, even if I translate it, it will be watered down with the use of synonyms. I just need to maintain the main points. That way, she has no way of reverse engineering the language. Klein retracted his gaze and casually asked Katlia, "Rumor has it that you and Queen Mystic had a falling out, but it doesn't seem to be the case." Katlia's glazed expression suddenly had a lively change. She pursed her lips and said, "What right do I have to fall out with her? I was just banished." Banished? Klein was just about to ask when blinding sunlight beamed as he naturally woke up. Looking at the bright sky outside, he wiped his forehead and muttered silently to himself. What a terrifying dream. After dealing with his wistfulness, Klein rolled off the bed and came to the deck. He continued his observation and awaited the appearance of mermaids. Nearly an hour later, he finally heard a faint, indistinct voice coming from the distance.